Hey, it's Mark Lanier with your video thought for the day. This week, at least Tuesday and Wednesday of this week and today, I've been talking about failure. And I talked about moral failure on Tuesday. Go back and listen to that if you need to. It's on YouTube. I talked yesterday about just generically failure and the fear of failure. But I want to get a little more granular about that with you today, because it's been my experience that sometimes our fear of not succeeding, our fear of failure, can be something that freezes us into inaction. In other words, we don't take appropriate action. We don't do what God wants us to do. We don't do what life calls us to do, because we're too afraid. And that's very understandable if we look only within ourselves for that reservoir or well that we've got to draw upon. But if we're looking to God as our reservoir, as our well, as our strength, then heavens, the fear of failure should be the last thing in the world that should cause us to freeze. I'm not saying we don't freeze to make sure we're pursuing a godly course. That's appropriate. Wait upon the Lord. But there's a difference between waiting upon the Lord to make sure you know what's godly, and stepping out in faith when you do, and being frozen from fear of failure. So the story I like for this is found in 1 Samuel. It's chapter 17. It's a very well-known story of David and Goliath. And it's one where the Philistine armies are on one set of hillside, and you've got the valley of Elah, and then on the other set of the hills, you've got the army of Israel and King Saul. And every day from the Philistinian encampment would come this giant Goliath. And he would come down to the stream bed area, the little valley between the two. Excuse me. And he would come down and he would taunt the armies of God. And he'd say, hey, I'm a guy. You got guys. Send your guy. Why should the armies have to fight? We'll just do a little one-on-one, and whoever wins for the whole army. Well, the Israelites were frozen in fear. Not one of them, from the least to the greatest, not one of them dared to take on Goliath and his taunt. Now, David was at home as the youngest of all of his brothers, taking care of the flocks while his brothers were in the army. Dad tells David, hey, grab some food, here it is, take it to the valley of Elah, go find your brothers and give it to them because they need to eat. And David shows up in time to hear Goliath's daily taunt. And David's just flabbergasted and stunned. He's not frozen in fear of failure like the rest of the Israelites. He is determined in faith to know who God is and what God can do. And so he's elbowing his brothers. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he'd taunt the armies of God? And then David goes to King Saul and he says, let no man's heart fail because of him. Nafal is the Hebrew word for fail there. It means to fall. Don't let your heart be fallen. Don't fear failure. I'll go fight the guy. And Saul's reaction as king is, hey, you're like a pipsqueak. You're a kid. You got no business fighting this guy. And David says, well, it's not me. It's the Lord. And the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from this uncircumcised Philistine. And so David goes and fights, and you know the story. The rest is history. If David had been frozen in fear like the rest of Israel, how different would history have turned out? And yet David was captured by faith, directed by God, and was able to draw from the well of strength that is God. So where does this leave me today? I want to walk in godliness, but when I do, I can walk boldly. I don't need to fear failure. I don't need to be frozen by fear. I need to walk boldly in faith, doing what's right, and trusting that the God who delivered David will deliver me. And the same goes for you. That's your video thought for the day. We'll wind this week up tomorrow. I'll see you then.